We are back for another edition of HDPR Live. I got my coffee mug here too, Tripp, no problem. I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Tripp Heller is from Redfoxs Resources. Tripp, welcome to HDPR Live.
Oh, thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me, and thanks for continuing to pump out this content during this time. We've certainly been watching, and the truck market is a big part of our business. So we've been appreciating the content through this. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, when I started this whole thing back last year, it was really with the idea of just how do we serve the industry, right? How do we give them information that is relevant to their world, help them with their businesses, and make things a little bit better. Let's get right into it. Tripp,
Sure.
your company recycles after treatment parts like DPF and DOC. Can you explain to us your buyback and recycling program, like how that all works?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually pretty straightforward. And so what we do, we buy back really failed, spent, cracked, damaged, excess, obsolete after treatment parts. They're catalyzed generally. So DPFs and DOCs primarily. And if we're talking about the on-highway truck market, we're also recycling natural gas catalysts from natural gas engines as well. But I think what's important is when we talk about recycling, the way that we think about that is actually taking the material that is no longer usable and extracting, what can be then sent back as raw materials back to the supply chain. So, like I said, we buy those parts back that essentially are no longer usable for fleets that might be sitting around, you're tripping over them in shops and things like that. And we take that material back, and we do not buy anything back for the purpose of future use. So we're not a remanufacturer or a reconditioner. We obviously, there are companies out there that are doing a good job of that, and I think some OEMs are obviously doing that as well. But the reman versus aftermarket versus new part replacement, we don't really get involved in much of that, because where we come into play is once a fleet or a shop has made that decision that they've actually need a part that needs to get replaced, unless there's a core program or a core return, generally you've got part that's there sitting there that's got some value. So we buy that back, and the main thing that we're trying to get out of those parts are the precious metals that feed that are in the catalyst material that really feed those emission reductions. So those are primarily platinum and palladium in diesel applications, mostly palladium in natural gas applications. But so yeah, we bring the material into our facility. Redfoxs pays for all shipping. We organize all the logistics. Generally, outside of California, if you've got 15 to 20 parts on a pallet, that's kind of our threshold of when we would set up a freight shipment. You can ask us for a quote on the front end. We're able to price these parts by OEM part number to let you know what you'll be receiving from a recycle standpoint. We'll take care of the shipping. You actually set up a shipment on our website. We'll send you the BOL. Generally, an LTL freight company comes and picks up the material the next day. Takes however long to get to our facility. Once it arrives at our facility, we'll let you know. We'll give you a heads up, and then we'll make payment within 15 business days of it arriving at our facility. And generally, those parts are then through our process and essentially destroyed within 2 or 3 days. And then when we make payment to you, what else comes along with that is a purchase agreement that'll let you give you a list of all the parts that we recycled, the date that they were destroyed, and a release of liability, letting you know that these aren't going to make their way back into the production cycle at some point. So we're really all the way at the end of the production line there. Once we, and kind of at the end of the day, we take that material, it goes through our processes. We recycle the scrap steel, and then the ceramic material that we receive from the DPFs and DOCs. That's all obviously decanned. It's formulated into a powder, blended, and then sent to a number of places where the actual smelting and the metals can then be returned to the supply chain.
See, that's really interesting, because when I first kind of was aware of you guys, right away I was thinking about my interview with Dave German at Road Warrior, and they're not a big fan of the reman DPF program, and they had lots to say about that. So I love the fact that you're actually taking something that otherwise just needs to be destroyed or just turfed, and you're turning it into a resource. Because I was going to ask you, how do you create value for your customers? I mean, if there's a pile of DPFs in the corner that are no good, that's how you create value.
Exactly. Yeah, and so you've got other alternatives. One being you can throw them in the the dumpster that goes to the landfill. That's obviously the worst case scenario, because then in that case you're paying somebody to take it away. It's filling the landfill when you don't need to, and it's you're kind of wasting the opportunity to reclaim these materials. And then the second thing that we see shops and fleets do is put them in their general scrap bins, and that's okay. It's kind of the second tier, right? Generally, if you're thinking about you're recycling for a penny a pound of material. Let's say 50 pounds for a DPF, you get 50 cents. And then rule of thumb, if you were to recycle that material and for us to get the precious metals out of it, it's about 100 times that. So it would be
Wow.
$50. Right?
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the main focuses of the heavy duty parts report and then all the content that we're putting out is I've sold parts for a long time. And we're always trying to encourage people to think about the total cost, right? When you buy a part, what's the actual cost, not the purchase price, but follow the cost all the way through and figure out, downtime, repair intervals, maintenance, like the whole thing. I never considered that at the end of a DPF's life or a DOC's life, there was a way to lower the cost per mile in essence
Sure.
by reducing your overall operating costs by dealing with a company like yours. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. No, and I appreciate the cost per mile, but if you actually to pencil that out, if you're going to run a DPF for 200,000 miles and you're going to get $50 back from us, that probably doesn't pencil out, and it won't really move the needle for any accountant. But we've seen, we treat them as customers, but essentially they're our suppliers, right, of where we get these parts. We've seen them use the funds pretty creatively, right? You can shops tend to they can really apply the money that we return back to maybe some work orders that have some skinny margins on them, and $2,500 can make the difference on a big batch repair order or something like that. We've seen these funds be used for what we would call the barbecue fund, or just they go to funding employee events and things like that, right? I mean, the revenue return from your recycling program is probably not going to make your plan, but we've also seen them fund things like employee bonus programs. And actually recently we've heard some of our customers have been using the funds for donations for local charities and obviously COVID relief and things like that. So it's like anything, it's the comment that we get more than anything is, well, it's certainly better than nothing, and so we appreciate that. And then the last comment on that is obviously all these fleets, we hear, I think one of the common threads that we hear through your podcast is the cost of after treatment and cost of maintaining your after treatment. And a big part of the replacement cost is the precious metal values from the raw material side. So just basic supply and demand. If we're able to use as much of the precious metals that are out running, above ground, and return that to the suppliers, that helps keeps the cost down for your new parts. So the recycling, in aggregate, globally, the recycling stock of precious metals is hugely important to keeping your parts pricing down for after treatment.
Yeah. And I mean, if you were to connect the one thing to cost per mile, I get your point. But what I've seen in running my own business and being involved in lots of other businesses is that most businesses that struggle with profitability die like a slow death from 1,000 cuts.
Right.
I'll give you an example. So one of our clients that we work with right now, when this whole COVID thing hit, they got a bunch of their employees. They put it out to their whole employee base and said, anybody that wants to volunteer to be on the cost reduction committee, volunteer. And they had a bunch of people volunteer. And they actually found something in the ballpark of $50,000 to $80,000 a month
Right.
of wasted money just by tightening up here, a little bit there, a little adjustment there, right? Something as simple as measuring the boxes and weighing them before you ship them instead of just guessing or giving
Right.
3 categories of box size.
Sure. Deal with
Little
the overage charges
things.
on the back end. I'll never see it. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all those little things that add up. So yes, this one revenue source isn't going to probably make or break your company. But I think a company that cares about it, it shows to me that they're going to care about all those little things. And chances are that company's going to be around for a long time.
That's a really good point. And, I don't know if you're aware of the Great Game of Business and that operation, but it's a sort of a business theory that we really follow closely. And yeah, one of the key tenets there is to create, ownership over those types of things, and play little things like mini games. And once you start to add it up and look at the scorecard and look at a scoreboard, it can really make big improvements for your organization.
Yeah, and you're helping the environment at the same time. So, I mean, it's just one of those triple wins. If there's
Yeah.
one thing, Tripp, that you want to leave people who are watching today with, like, what's that one message?
I would say keep an eye on your dumpsters and your scrap metal bins, right? For the on-highway side, I mean, more often than not, we'll go out on a pickup, and we'll be dealing with a parts manager or a service manager or something like that, and or somebody like that in the organization, and they'll have a nice, neat pile for us to pick up. And on our way out, we always kind of take a peek in the scrap metal bin, and sure enough, most of the time there could be a DPF or a DOC sitting in there, and we'll make sure we go back and circle back and say, hey, is there any reason why these are in the scrap metal bin? Can we take them? We'll get you paid for them. And so that would be the main thing. And if I could add on that too, is keep a close eye on the DOCs as well. The DOCs tend to have a higher value from a recycling standpoint than the DPFs. So we talk a lot about DPFs, and that's kind of the word that gets thrown around most often. But keep an eye on your DOCs as well, because those will tend to have about twice the recycle value as the DPFs. And as I think, I think the folks from Road Warrior and DES have done a really good job on the technical side on your podcast to say how important the performance of the DOCs are. We certainly agree with that. So as you're replacing those, remember those you can participate in our program with the DOCs as well. So those would be the things. Keep an eye on your scrap bin and keep an eye on your DOCs.
Awesome. You've been watching HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin. We've been speaking with Tripp from Redfoxs Resources. To learn more, go to redfoxresources.com. Don't forget to go over to jamieirvin.ca or heavydutypartsreport.com. Takes you to the same place. And subscribe to our weekly emails so you don't miss out on any of this great content. Tripp, thanks for being on HDPR Live.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it.
You can watch our next video, and don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel.